All right, so we're going to be talking about Python libraries and modules. May seem kind of like big words or big concepts, but essentially they're two pretty simple concepts to understand. So let me talk about Python modules first. This is the idea of just kind of making your code a little more modular, as the word would kind of imply. Breaking larger projects into multiple files. This helps with file organization, and this also helps with code reusability that we talked about before. So if I wanted to do something really quickly, let me copy a very simple example here. So I'm going to create multiple files here. So let's do file1.python and file2 for lack of interesting names. That's not what I want. File2.python. All right, so we had two files here. I'm going to paste the code we had before and move this over. So again, you could do something very similar in JavaScript. This is what I show in Python. So in fact, we're creating modules here. So in file one, I have a function that's called say hello. It takes in no parameters and simply prints out hey there. If I go to file two, if I want to use that function, I need to import file one, and then I can use it here. So go ahead. Oops. All right, so in this case, I'm importing file one, I'm aliasing as anything, and I'm calling say hello from that file. Right, so everything that exists in here. So if I create another function, define say goodbye. Thanks. Right, I like double quotes, so I'll switch that. All right, so everything in this file, we don't have to export it like we had to do in JavaScript. We simply need to import it and where we want to use it, and then we can do that. So anything, say goodbye, this will all work. So if I go Python file2.py, right? So we use the functions that exist in file one. So this is our module that we're importing, and then we're using here. Again, the reason this is better is because let's say I create a file three. Right, and this, let's say this is some super fancy application, import file one. And let's say hypothetically, I want to use only one of those functions again. So let's say, so do Python file 3.py. Notice I get bye-bye, that's the same function. File two, I aliased whatever I was importing as anything. You don't have to. So notice in file three, I just imported file one, and then I use that here. Again, this goes back to code reusability. So file two and file three are both using the goodbye function. This is better design, right? Because I've centralized these functions. Then the alternative would have been, what if I copy these functions, toss those over here? So I'm not going to import anything. I'm just going to plop those here. All right, so this is still going to work the same way, but now the say goodbye is also need to be in file three. So sure, I can duplicate it, right? Nothing stopping me, it's still going to work. So instead of file one, I'll just use say goodbye. But yeah, now I have duplicate code. I have the same function that exists in two different places. That's not going to be good, right? Because if I want to update this to be goodbye, now I need to update it here if I want to keep the functionality the same. So again, the idea of modules is basically kind of create modules that have one purpose only. Don't create a module that's going to do math functions for you, but also do spell checking for you, and also, compute the value of pi to the 33rd decimal. I don't know. Modules should be concise. They should be single focused so that you can reuse pieces as needed, and you don't have to reuse everything, right? Again, so you can create a module that has every single function that you might want, but that's not going to be best use case, because then you got to import all those functions into anything that needs to use just one particular function out of it. So again, make sure your module is granular so that you can use pieces as you need them instead of using a whole blob of code that your application might not need. And the idea of modules comes into play, especially when you're working on teams. Like let's say I'm working with Seth, and Seth created like a say goodbye function for me. He'll just hand me the file, and I could use this code. in my code easily. I don't need to kind of recreate the wheel that he did for me. You can nest them in functions. So file organizations, let's say, I want to create a functions folder. Well, maybe I'll that's not what I want. Functions. All right, VS Code. Company work here. All right, so create a folder called functions. Let's call it modules. All right, create modules. I can dump file 1 in there. Just a small thing. If you want to import it, just know that you got to import it with a dot. So file 1 has good stuff I want. So do import modules dot file 1 as something. All right, so just understand when you're accessing it through folders, you want to use the dot. So if I name this something else, let's name it donuts. I would also change this to donuts. All right, so don't get confused when you're trying to access files between modules. Just understand the syntax of finding the correct files. Any questions on modules?
Encore. I noticed when you use the folder name modules, it turned the folder blue. I'm guessing it's a reserved name in VS Code. And if that's the case, was there any rules or standards with that module name tag?
I believe that is being done by one of the plugins that I installed. Yeah, so
Okay.
it identifies some pre-reserved, names. Like if you have a Git folder, they'll highlight Git. So yeah, it will kind of do that. It is VS Code doing it through an extension, I believe. I don't think it's a default behavior.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Yep. So yeah, a lot of great extensions you can find. Again, there's hundreds of them. You can kind of add to your liking. Okay, we got a couple minutes left. There's one more thing I wanted to do, but I promise we'll get you to lunch soon enough. So we've talked about the idea of libraries, right? Tom kind of went over some libraries yesterday, I think. For your Def Grammar Challenge, you have to install the prompt library. This is the whole idea of development. Again, you don't want to reinvent the wheel each time you're trying to create an application, right? Like if I want to create an application that just showed me the current weather in my city, I'm not going to create a whole weather, application that can, detect the weather outside. Someone probably has done that before, and I should be able to leverage that and kind of reuse their work into my application. So again, the software development community is generally open source. So sure, you can create a product, and if you want to sell and make money, that's obviously what companies do, right? Like Microsoft makes Microsoft Office, they sell it because they have a great product and people will pay for it. But for the most part, there's a lot of open source libraries where I might develop something that is really cool. I want to share it with the world. Well, great. You should be able to use something that I developed if I make that open source. So I'm gonna have something I want to do. So let's create a new file. Let's call it donuts.py. And let's move that out here. I'm gonna delete some files just to declutter. Get that out of here. All right, so my task right now, I'm a huge fan of donuts. If you didn't pick that up already, hopefully by now you do know. But let's say I want to do something a little more graphical. So I know currently we're only dealing with a terminal, and I know when I was initially learning how to software develop, I was like, this isn't really cool. I thought applications would be like, you have UIs where you can click buttons, you can type into an input box, see cool visuals. Well, yes, that is part of software development. But the part we're focused on is the algorithmic side and just development part. So these applications, we're dealing with terminal, nothing too visually stunning for us, but just understand that we'll get to that point, especially when we get to web development and tying in applications there. But I do want to do something graphical right now, and that is I want to try to kind of draw a donut into my terminal. All right, so I'm going to try that on the fly here. So let's just try to kind of hard code it. So print, let's do some print statements. I'm not sure how great this will look, but I'll try my best. So let's use hashtags. And then just gonna keep going at it. Let's see how artistic I can be. Please don't expect too much out of me. Like that. All right, I'll do this quickly, I promise. All right, that looks kind of like a donut. I'll do my best. Maybe add one more. All right, this is my attempt at a donut. I don't know if that is going to render as I wish. It's probably going to be squished, I bet. Python donuts. All right. I mean, okay, use your imagination. I could kind of be a donut, maybe not have as big as a middle section. Okay, you guys get the idea. I'm not going to waste too much time here. But let's say that's my best rendering of the donut. Okay, you guys can probably imagine it as donut, but that's not that great, right? There's my best attempt at a donut. But there's probably someone that's probably had this idea and said, you know, what if I want to show stuff in the terminal because we don't have like a UI to present anything in, but what if they want to show something that's more visual in terminals? Well, let's kind of try to find something like that. So I'm going to Google Python since we're working in Python, terminal images. Anything I find? I think I know what I'm looking for. So image and terminal. Right? Okay, there's image printer. So there's PyPy is a site for finding libraries. So let me just search in here. Let's go with ASCII art, I think is what I'm looking for. All right, there's a bunch of these here. All right, I'm just gonna cut the drama. I know the one I want, so I'll find it. But yeah, so PyPy is probably the central place, the place you want to go to find libraries. Again, there's thousands of libraries that you find on here. So if you're curious, if you're like, hey, has someone ever done X, Y, or Z? You could probably find a library for it. There's nothing too out there. But ASCII magic is what I want. So when you go to PyPy, they have pretty good documentation. They kind of show you how to use it. So you need to install via pip. So pip is the installer for Python. It's the same thing as npm for JavaScript. So it's the same idea. npm is just installing JavaScript libraries. Pip will install Python libraries for you. So they kind of tell you how to do it. I'm just going to copy this, pip install ASCII magic. So for my system, I got to use pip3. That's something I probably need to alias. You guys can probably use pip if you set up everything correctly, but I'm going to use pip3. Run that. All right, so notice I got some errors. If you want to see what's been installed on your system already, you can do pip list. Sorry. Again, I'm using pip3. You guys can probably use pip. But this is going to show all the libraries that I've installed on my computer. So these are, there's a lot of libraries in here. So there's, I don't know what Ashford is. I installed IPDB. There's something called Pillow for images. Again, whole list of libraries I've installed. So any project I can use, I want to use this library, I can. So I installed ASCII magic following this. And again, I kind of just go through that documentation. Let's see, what do I want to do here? Let's print out something to the terminal. Basic usage. Let's get a little more crazy. Let's go with this. All right, so again, I'm just using someone else's work because there's no way I'm going to implement this by myself, especially in like 10 minutes. I could probably try to figure out how to render ASCII art from an image, but that is something that I'm not interested in at this point. So instead, I'm going to use their code, their library that someone already has created for me. So I'm going to import ASCII magic. All right, so that's a library I installed, so I need to import it. And then let's kind of adopt their code. So I don't want a line, I want a donut. So let's see if I can find a nice picture of a donut somewhere. I think I have one here. Sorry, there it is. Let me drag it over. Okay, so there's my donut. Tasty donut right there. I want to use that here. So let's create a new folder, images. Again, you know how to create a folder, just better folder organization or file organization. So let's say images, let's say IMG. And then toss that in there. And that's in IMG. And then donuts.256.png. All right, so I have my image in my IMG folder. I want this to be kind of small, so I go 64. I just want a black background. All right, so what this is going to do is hopefully open my image up, convert it to ASCII automatically, and that's what the library is doing. And hopefully get something that looks a little better than what I did before. So I'm going to do Python donuts.py. All right, there we go. That's kind of cool. That looks way better than what I had before. Let's see the original image. So it's basically trying to render this image here. So let's make that a little smaller. Let's go with 40 columns. All right, so there we go. Kind of cool. Again, that's just one random library that someone developed, and I'm able to leverage that. So again, when you're trying to create a big project, if you're probably doing something complex that you think someone else has probably done, definitely search if a library exists out there, and that's going to make your life much more easier. And again, it's kind of easier to kind of, instead of reinventing the wheel, you can use some cool libraries out there. So I think that's a cool one. Again, you can probably find some really cool Python libraries out there. It's a popular language. So kind of explore what libraries exist. And when it comes down to your personal projects and group projects, you guys will probably be discovering new awesome libraries to add to your projects. All right, so that's the idea of libraries. Again, NPM for JavaScript. If you search NPM, you should get this a similar site. So libraries, again, you can search NPM for libraries that exist. So if I want to see weather app, let's see if there's anything. Get weather CLI. So this would give me some weather data. Again, I'm not going to have weather infrastructure. So this library has access to some weather data, and I could leverage that for my application if I need to. All right, so that's the whole idea of creating modules and creating libraries and using third-party libraries. Any questions on using libraries, how to install them, using pip, or anything else on your mind?
Ankur, when you're using pip install, it's installing it globally for any, I think you said any program that I write.
Yes.
And I'm a little bit confused between like pip, npm, and say brew. I'm a little confused about the difference there. I don't know if that's a fair question or not, or if it's not, doesn't make sense even.
Excellent question. So yeah, we have these managers that we're using. So npm is node packet manager. I think that's what it stands for. Yeah. So
Yeah.
And then pip stands for Python installation package or something. I don't know. I'm making those up. They stand for something. Anyway, these are all managers. So npm is what you use for JavaScript. So JavaScript has libraries. When you use npm, it's going to download them from the web and then add them to your machine. Same thing with pip. Pip does the same thing, but for Python. You also mentioned brew. Brew is an application manager for your Mac OS. So I know Windows, you guys don't have Homebrew. Brew kind of just lets you manage those applications. So if you do like a brew update, well, automatically know how to update those applications. Again, you don't have to use Homebrew, but it just kind of makes it easier to upgrade and install items to your system. So when you do brew install Python, for example, that's installing the Python libraries from the web onto your machine. Or you might do, brew install Git. Git has libraries. You're downloading all that code and the application to your system. So that's what brew is doing. It's managing applications. Pip is managing Python libraries. npm is managing Node libraries.
Thank you so much. That really clears it up for me.
Absolutely. Great question. Any other lingering questions about npm, JavaScript stuff, Python stuff? I want to make sure you guys are kind of good with each language. You can get plenty of practice writing in Python and JavaScript with the challenges for the rest of the week. So there won't be a shortage of practice there. All right, you guys all good? You guys ready to code in Python? Again, I enjoy coding in Python more than JavaScript because it's quicker. Again, the tabbing, the tab syntax, you can kind of get used to it, but it forces you to have good style code. When I was writing some bad JavaScript, right, I could do if, I guess one more thing I want to highlight since I have a couple months, I'm going to stop recording because it's not relevant.